are going live here, and I am looking forward to
Talk about outlines.
talking about outlines and
What could be better?
ready to have a conversation with Tracee Hahn. Hi, everyone. This is Julie Henriques. I am the Executive Director of Sisters in Crime, and I am delighted to welcome Tracee Hahn to this Instagram Live. So a couple of things. First of all, we're in the middle of our summer scrawl. So this is for Sync members. There are 5 write-ins a day. We also are using a group goal setting planner for folks so that people can track how long they're writing, how many words they're writing, if they're editing, whatever they want to do, however they want to do it. There's no pressure on it, but it's about committing to spending some time in July working on your work in progress. It could be research, it could be editing, whatever it is, but you're spending time focusing on being a writer, which is kind of great. And so the Instagram lives we're doing are about craft this month. Tracee Hahn is an excellent person to talk to about craft. And she's also, I just want to sing her praises a million ways from Sunday. She is on the board of Sisters in Crime. She's in her 7th year on the board because she got into the presidential succession line after she'd been on for 4 years, which is an additional 3 years. So currently she's the immediate past president of Sisters in Crime. We are so grateful for her service. She's still got some time left, but she may or may not be counting the days. But Tracee, just before we start talking about the subject today, can we just talk about board service and how much, I mean, it's work, but how much you get out of serving on boards?
Yeah, and I think we say this all the time, and I've heard many other people say this, but you get out of it what you put into it, I think, in many ways. And so when you join any group, even if you just join Sisters in Crime Worldwide, or if you join a chapter of Sisters in Crime, and if you join the board, the more committed you are, the more engaged you are, the more you kind of know what's going on, and therefore you feel more engaged and you get so much more out of it. It's been wonderful for me. I came onto the board, well, many years ago now, and the people I've met, the programs that we do that I've been a part of, the first thought of doing it and saying, yeah, let's give it a try. And the write-ins are one of those, like, will people really show up? Do we have enough volunteers to run these? And we're like, we'll give it a try for a month. And then suddenly it's this massive program that has benefited so many people. And for me, that's part of the joy of serving on a board, to be at the spark of an idea and to see it come to fruition and say, I was just a little part of that. And to talk about the write-ins again, just briefly, for those who don't know, it's 25 minutes and then a little 5 minutes of chat and 25 minutes. And so you can come in and out whenever you want. You might say, I can't be there for the whole hour. The participants are completely invisible. There is no possibility of being seen or heard, which means you can truly be doing whatever. And so, I think that's also what makes it easy. People can step out of their office and sit in the car and just say, I'm going to write for 30 minutes or 25 minutes or 10 minutes. Or we have some people who will join, be at their desk, and then 4 hours later, when the next one rolls around, they're like, I wrote the entire time. And it's great to then touch base with people. So it's about community. Sisters in Crime primarily is about a community of writers. And we have so many ways that you can be part of that community.
Yeah. And in non sprawl, so we're doing the summer scrawl right now. In November, we do this again. January, we do this again. So those are month-long intensives. But during the other months, we have 15 write-ins a week. Mm-hmm. So, it's, if you've never done a write-in, please try it, because it's magic. It's just an amazingly effective thing to see and chat. Everyone check in, cheer each other on. I did this, I did that, and then focus again to write. It's a great thing to do. You can do this with your friends, but join Sisters in Crime this summer. Use the promo code SUMMER26, and it's half price for membership. And you will be a member through December this year. So that's free webinars, being able to look at the webinar library, and joining these write-ins for free. So that's part of membership.
And that's $30 is half price membership. Yeah. I mean, that's really a deal for so many webinars. You'd pay more than that for just one webinar. And they're archives, you can go back and see them. There's so much bang for your buck. I hate to use the old phrase.
Yeah.
We could teach a getting rid of cliches in your writing right after this, but it really is, it is such an incredible investment in not only in your craft, but also a support community, finding people who you can ask questions of who have had a lot of experience. So I cannot speak more highly about it.
And crime writers are amazingly supportive and kind. I just, I think honestly, it's because we all work out so many issues on the page, or, you're a little upset about something. Oh, great. I'll just kill them on the page. But in life, there's a generosity of spirit that is super helpful as well.
Well, and I think crime writers love crime writing because in the end, there is a resolution.
Yeah.
That, someone will be caught, brought to justice. There is the goal of resolving these things in a positive way, no matter the horrors that got us there. And crime writing is a broad field, right? Everything. I mean, Sisters in Crime, we have people who write all sorts of things. It could be nonfiction crime writing. It could be, like true crime. It could be horror. It could be cozy mysteries. It can be traditional mysteries. Domestic suspense, historical mysteries. Just so many things that fit into the bucket. I always like to say, technically at the heart of every book, there is a mystery, right? Traditional means that someone is murdered and then you find them. It might be that something is stolen and then you find them. But there is a mystery at the heart of everything. Will the person get what they want? So you can learn with this group of people or find a group of people, even if you're a little bit mystery adjacent.
Yes. No, absolutely. Absolutely.
And our topic today is for everybody who's writing, correct?
Yes. And we want to talk about this because when I'm going to say the title, it's outlining, so it's outlining the tool for every need. Tracee has come up with 3 pithy titles: Your Outline, Your Way, or Your Outline, Your Tool. So those are the 3 pithy topics. And when this is published on YouTube, you will see which one we chose. But I think too often when we say outlining, there's plotters, people who outline their entire novel before they start. There are pantsers, people who write by the seat of their pants. So they might have a couple of ideas and then they just start writing and then they work on structure afterwards or at some point. Tracee is here to talk about different types of outlining, but the point that we both want to underline here is that whether you're a plotter or a pantser, outlining is your friend.
Mm-hmm. It is.
Right.
And yes, it is. And one of the things I think that we've talked about is that you can quote outline, which is a fixed term, and it just means a tool to help you write. You can outline at any point before you get started, when you're struggling with a scene, when you want to look at your first draft and revise. You can say, well, how can an outline help me? You have to pick your own style. You experiment. You say, no, I just like to write on scratch paper and put my ideas in order. Or no, I have an Excel spreadsheet. I know someone who writes domestic suspense. She uses an Excel spreadsheet because she wants to keep track of what happens, but also track of when did it happen. So it's like at 1:12 p.m. You couldn't have seen this, and the video camera. And so she's tracking lots of detail. She feels like she needs an outline when she's writing. It's all there. And then what you've already referred to is that it's a tool. It's not an oracle. You don't like fix it in concrete because it's an outline. It is a tool. You are always in charge, whether you're planning before or whether you're going back. You're just trying to use all the tools at your fingertips. I have a few examples. Should I show my examples?
Yeah, let's show examples, and then let's talk some more about different ways of using the tool of outlining. But show examples because, again, open your mind, folks. This is you're going to find something in this conversation that's going to give you an aha moment, especially if you're stuck at any place in your writing or your editing. So bear with us.
So these are some cards, like the typical note cards, and you may say, I am a true plotter and I want to say, where is my inciting incident? Where's my midpoint? Where's my, where am I reaching the denouement? Where am I having plot point 1, plot point 2, and my climax? And you may say, before I get started, I just want to put my big ideas out there. And I'm making sure that I have all my components before I write. You might also do this when you've done a draft or when you're halfway through and you say, wait a minute, do I have a big reveal? have I hit a climax point? And you're double checking yourself. I like to do as written outlines that are just a couple of words about each section or chapter, depending on how you write, and that you can look at those and say, okay, this is what it is. Is it what I thought it should be? Like, because I don't want to read the whole book again. I want to say, yeah, okay, I cover that in chapter 1. I cover that in scene 2, scene 3. I hit these main points. These are the characters that were in my outline. I remember an editor going back and saying, you have a second, not even a secondary, like a third level character who's not mentioned for 10 chapters. The reader will forget who they are. You need to, kind of bring the reader back in, remind them, they are the postman or whatever. And I was like, oh, yeah, or I could just have them mentioned or thought of. And so it enabled me, the outline let me say, yeah, let me drop them in as a reference. Let me have someone think of them in, whatever way. And I was able to kind of strategically do some fixes. I like to also, early stages, just write on scraps of paper. And I have ideas. And I say, well, that's obviously a beginning of the book idea. That's obviously a next thing idea. That's obviously an idea that's going to happen later. So I stick it later down my page. And then I go back and I type them up. And this may be because I'm more serious about what they are. It may be because I've written it and I have more detail. But I don't feel like it's fixed because it's just a scrap of paper. And I can change it.
So in the webinar libraries of Sisters in Crime, which is, a member only benefit, another one. But Jessica Ellicott did a polka dot planning webinar, and she's a plotter, but she also works with people and just gets Post-it notes. And as people have ideas, she's like, don't limit yourself. Just tell me what an idea for a scene is. And then just puts them on a wall and then eventually gets them shaped into what the plot could be or what it needs to be. So again, if you're stuck or if you're, trying to figure out what needs to come next, or you've written yourself into a corner, don't think chronologically. Now, I have to write chronologically. Some people can write out of order. I'm not one of those people, but you can say, okay, wait, they need to go on a bus at some point. So I'm going to put that out there, and then we're going to figure out how to get them on the bus. And that's part of this.
And that's a good point, because if you're working on something and you're writing it, and we all know that even people who plot suddenly will have an inspirational idea as they write, and they think, oh, wait a minute, this is something new that came up out of the character's dialogue or the situation. You think, oh, now they have to get on a bus or they have to reference a bus, and you can stick it on a note on your outline and say, resolve this thread, resolve this red herring, resolve this thought. And I think it does help us feel like we're controlling all these random thoughts we have. Not all of them are going to make it in. Recently, I'm cutting down a very large draft manuscript, and as you really trim something, it's not about, as you really edit something, it's not about just cutting words, but is the sequence right? And am I restructuring things potentially? I just really quickly did a note about the section that was for me very hard, put a note, I did tape them to a window because you can take the tape off easily, and was able to stand back and look at them. And it let me see them differently. And think of it as like if you were getting dressed and you would say, well, this is what I think I'm going to wear, but I don't think it's quite right. And then you would lay some other things out and you go, well, yes, I need to pick the other jacket or the other necklace or whatever. Just let me step back from it and say, wait a minute, these things can be combined differently. This thing is actually needs to be introduced earlier. But if you're reading a manuscript and it's flowing pretty well, like as words on a page, I think we just feel committed to that. And I like the freedom of the standing back, and I could look at it and sit in my chair and study it. And then all of a sudden I'm like, wait a minute, I know how to fix this. But I'm also, my training was as an architect. And so I'm a very visual thinker. And so I think, I have friends who are like, it would just be too much. They need that Excel spreadsheet. They need the hard details, and they're very comfortable with moving their cells around and adding the details in. And so I think it is about finding, what does an outline mean to you? And what does it mean at different points of your book? Because it is the most flexible tool to spot check your work, to consider restructuring. It could be of a chapter. It could be of the whole thing. And what you need will be different. what you write down, what the note that you see will be different depending on how you're going to use that tool.
Well, and let's talk about that restructuring because I think for pantsers, this is when it actually the outline can help because you may be rereading your manuscript or you might have been given it to a beta reader who is like, yeah, I got really bored or this nothing
Mhm.
happened here. So you use your note cards or you put things in and really say if the midpoint is here, then that's in 50% of your manuscript.
Mhm.
So, you look at your plot points, and if they're all jammed towards the front or
Mhm.
they're all jammed at the end, you don't have enough breathing space in between. That's why readers are getting bored. That's why they're skipping
Mhm.
chapters. That's why they don't care about so and so character because they're in a dead space. So, outlining afterwards is very helpful to
Mhm.
look at structure and to make sure, as Tracee said, the characters are all where they, in the scenes and that it's balanced and figuring out structure, no matter what genre you're writing in, is part of the work of a writer. And
Mhm.
that usually fixing structure usually happens in editing.
Before I was published, I decided I'm going to write a mystery, and so I read 3 mysteries by prominent, like, New York Times bestselling authors who were very different types of writers, but they all wrote mysteries. One was police procedural, one was traditional, whatever. And I outlined all 3 books. And, I think people say, yeah, but if you're following some sort of, midpoint, plot point 1, plot point 2, isn't that just too prescriptive? And I outlined all of them. One of the books was Elizabeth George. I think it was 700 pages long. Another one, Michael Conley, was probably, 342 pages. And it was interesting. When I did the proportions on all of the books,
Yeah.
the midpoint fell at the middle. And so the proportion, the book is longer,
Right.
but the middle is still the middle. The middle was still a climactic turning point moment. And that's when I thought, wait a minute, or it really reinforced for me what I had always heard, that we carry with us, millennia worth of what does storytelling mean? What is the arc of a story? And if it's a short story or a very long book, there is still an arc. And deep inside our brain, we expect it.
Yeah.
And I thought, yes, it is a proportionate to the length of your book. So I always like to say if my book, like the publisher says, yeah, you need to hit about this many pages, you sort of know how long your book is going to be. I do a sheet of paper, I do butcher paper, and I do hashtags at every 10 pages, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70. And I know where my midpoint is. The book will shift a little bit. And I'll say, okay, this is a major midpoint idea. This is an end idea. And I can kind of scope it out and I can say, wait a minute, I don't yet know any of the second half of the book ideas. Do I need to know them or will I figure those out?
Right.
But I can get a sense that, and the book I'm working on right now has multiple points of view, which is a different kind of struggle. How quickly are you introducing characters? There's a way to step back on that a little bit. Not that it necessarily means I'm doing it right, but it is a tool to look at some of the juggling and say, how, what does that look like kind of from a top level? Yeah.
Right. And is that midpoint hitting for all the different points of view or is it within 3 or 4 scenes? Again, this is the expectation. You can, and when we talk about plot point
Mhm.
one, 25% in, plot point two, 75% in, those are twists. That doesn't mean the only twists. Those just mean, and twists, we're talking about changing reader expectations or giving them new information or just making them go, whoa, what just happened? That's not just crime writing. That's any kind of writing is just keep the reader excited to keep going.
I guarantee if you go back and read Homer's Odyssey, since it's coming out as a film, I thought about that. I guarantee there's story arc in there where you can say these major revolutionary things that happen to Odysseus will hit a turn. They'll hit that inciting moment where he can't back out. He's pulled into this journey. He literally he doesn't have a choice to go back to his old life on his journey home. And then you'll have the things where you big reversal of fortune. And then you'll have some sort of some people call it the mirror, where the book you're like now into the second half,
Mhm.
where you've kind of gone uphill, you're going to keep going uphill for a while, but you know that there has been a revolution. Something has truly dramatically happened. And then, of course, the final reversal or correcting event that propels us to the end. Yeah, and I just love that ability, whether you're working on a chapter, whether you're thinking about a novel. Do I have enough ideas? That's a question people ask. Do I have enough ideas for this novel? If you're thinking about writing long fiction for the first time, put some ideas out on paper and say, well, what do I think is going to happen to these characters or to the situation, depending on where you come to it. You can also say, who are the characters I might need to tell the story? And you can stick them on a post-it note or on a scrap of paper and say, what would their role be? And play with it in a way that doesn't feel like, oh, but that scene that I wrote already sounds pretty good, so I'm going to
Right.
stick with it.
Right. And having your secondary, tertiary characters having their own arc, or when I've written cozies, when you write a cozy, you've usually got a couple of other storylines going on. Now
Mm-hmm.
they're all serving the major storyline. That might not be clear to the end of the book, but
Mm-hmm.
they're all in service to the theme and to the end. But all of those storylines also have their own arcs, and so
Mm-hmm.
really, again, making sure the characters show up, and don't be the kind of writer who the second cousin is the person who did it, and you mention that person once in the first 10 pages and then not again to the end. You don't want to be that kind of person.
No. And I like to take my outline when it's, so I think the important thing is when you're outlining to write is one thing. When you're outlining to correct or edit even your own work or as a tool with somebody else's work, I like to outline something I've already read.
Yeah.
So if in chapter one, you know, somebody is doing something that seems very important, your main character, they're in a dramatic moment, we're all excited to read more about them, and the postman drops off a letter and they have to sign for it. And I can think, oh my gosh, I've read this book. That's the murderer. The postman is the murderer. They were there right there on page one, you know, and or the postman is going to, disappear in a way that changes the story. That goes in my outline, and it would not have gone in my outline if I were reading the book for the first time.
Right.
So the most beneficial, and that's where your own work is the same too, because you go back and you say, okay, this character who was just a fun person at the beginning does come in later. And then I like to go back, and I do not have a system of color. It is whatever is handy, but I'll say my main character will be green, and I'll highlight their name in green every time they're in, every chapter, whether they are mentioned or in it. I have a way to show that they're just mentioned versus in it. And I do that with all the main characters. And then I go back with, each one has their own color. I go back with, dotted lines for that. I mean, I have to get creative because you run out of colors, but showing plot points. So
Yeah.
what something happens and we leave this, we leave a scene at an exciting moment. And I'm like, did that get resolved? And it may not get resolved in the next chapter. It may get resolved 12 chapters later, but I can say, wait a minute, it does get resolved. And
Right.
and so when I'm looking at a complex book, I don't have to read the whole thing again. I can say, yes, this red herring, if you're writing a mystery, got resolved. Wait a minute, this character, they dropped out for 10 chapters. They cannot drop out for 10 chapters.
Right.
There's so many ways to spot check your work and to study other work the same way. And then you can say, when, for example, in a mystery, what I learned was that all the main clues, like all the red herrings, kind of spread out like a fan, and then they stopped having new ones. Maybe it
Mm-hmm.
all came together. When did they start to resolve them? So they were taking them off the reader's plate. That we realized that was a clue, but it's been resolved, or it was a red herring, it's been resolved. You start to see the arc so that it all doesn't have to be wrapped up in the last 30 pages.
Yeah.
So many useful ways to use an outline. We need a better word for outline.
I
It's a
know,
fun.
I know. And hopefully folks have heard this. I mean, I love talking about this kind of stuff. I'm such a geek. There's no one way to write,
Yeah.
so everyone should know that. But Tracee, are you are you a pantser or plotter or hybrid?
Oh, I think I'm a hybrid. I'm definitely a hybrid. I know what I think the start of the book is going to be, and I know how the book's going to end. And that's whether I'm writing straight mysteries or, historical fiction that doesn't have a mystery at the heart. That does not mean that that is how it's going to end. I would say the 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 actual resolution will stay the same. How it's revealed or the exact scene that it's revealed may change, but I know where I'm going. And I know what the first 20% of the book should be, and I start writing. And I have my big outline that has the ideas I think I'm going to. And then I usually get to the point where I say, and ideally now I'll have them on the outline. I like to go back to early outlines and be like, yeah, I was smart enough to skip those early scenes and just start later. But
Yeah.
by putting them on my outline, kind of worked my way through it. So I got to start at the more appropriate point. Um, but I love to start writing. And as I write, my characters come a little bit more alive and some things happen. And I think, oh, good, I'm going to put this on my outline. I'm going to put this on my outline. But I know where it should occur. I know that it's a, last quarter of the book. This will be a great resolution thing, or I know that this should happen next. And it helps me keep some perspective on the arc of the story. So they're not all stacked up right away. The big things.
So that's tent polling for folks, that's like,
Mm-hmm.
I know here's the major things. So I am a plotter. I
Mm-hmm.
spend a month or 6 weeks plotting, like writing every scene card. Doesn't mean that it doesn't change, but I've tried to not be, and it's a disaster. So, I mean, this is just how my brain works. And it could be because I've had full-time jobs and I write at night or on weekends. And when I sit down, I need to know exactly what the goal is for this session. So, this is when they have this conversation, or this is when she gets on the bus. So, again, there's no one way to do it, and you
Mm-hmm.
change it up. And you should change it up.
Mm-hmm.
But using an outline at some point in your writing process is just a tool that's invaluable.
Mm-hmm. It is. It is. And it's been fun to talk about
It
outlines.
has been fun to talk about outlines with you, Tracee Hahn. Thank you so much for your service to Sisters in Crime, and thank you for being part of today's Instagram Live.
Oh, it was great to be here.